Greetings and welcome to part 2 of the chapter on media effects. Now, this is the only chapter we really spend this much time on, but I think it's because it's one of the most important ones. Now we're really starting to look at, okay, we know that we have some effects on the media, but what kind of effects does the media have on us, not just individually, but as a culture and society? So that's why we spend a little bit of extra time. So last week we talked about some of the different theories, bullet theory, cultivation theory, etc. This week what we're going to do is take a look at maybe two areas that kind of illustrates how those theories work in practice. And I think it's something that you'll be able to relate to on both of those. So I'm going to finish that discussion on that chapter real quick. Let's plan on having a Zoom meeting on Wednesday. I think this chapter is meaty enough and one of those things that we can have some conversation about. And plus, we need to do a little checkup and prep getting ready to go into the last couple of weeks of the semester. So let's do a Zoom meeting on Wednesday of this week. There'll be a forum on that. And the things that we're talking about in this chapter, I think, are going to lead you to some topics for your final paper. So the first paper was about you and media. The second one, the bigger one, is about how media affects us as a people, as a society. And so some of the things we're going to talk about in this chapter are going to relate to that or give you some topic ideas for that. So I hope that that's helpful. All right, so I'll cover that PowerPoint. We'll do a Zoom on Wednesday. There'll be the forum on that. And again, I hope everybody's doing well. So let me jump into this PowerPoint. We're about midway through. I think I'm on slide 13. And what we're talking about are cultural effects here. Now, this is like, how does the media transmit its messages? So let's take one step back and remember that we think that now media is the primary storyteller in our society. It doesn't really come from older institutions, maybe not as much from family because family's more diffused and spread out. And so the media carries a lot of the story. And as human animals, we learn a lot from stories. How we're supposed to act, how we're supposed to feel, what makes things work in a society. A lot of that comes to us via stories. And if the media is delivering most of the stories to us, then we need to look at it and say, well, what kind of effects does that have? So two ideas on that is, one is historical transmission. That is stories of how things were and kind of those big picture ideas of what it means to be somebody in society. And then also contemporary transmission or diffusion of innovation. Now what that means, and it leads to something called the digital divide, is people who have access to technology and media have the opportunity to learn more than people who don't. And that's an important factor. In fact, if you know somebody now who lives in an area where they don't get good internet service, they feel the pain of that. They miss out on some of the things that everybody else seems to have. So those two ideas, contemporary and historical transmission. Two of my areas that I focus on, and I'm going to be on slide 14 of that deck now. One of them is body image for women, women's roles, women's attitudes, things of that nature. I think, just between you and me, I think we do an awful lot of damage to women in the images that we are shown and that we show them. All right. So we all know now that every image in media is crafted. And we're not just talking Photoshop. We're not just talking about taking one model and kind of hitting a couple things. We're talking a lot of cover photos that aren't even one real person, but they're her eyebrows and her nose. It's a composited editorial fantasy that we're fed. So we don't even really get to see real people in a lot of the advertising and a lot of the entertainment because those are crafted images. I know that personally from doing big studio shoots, and you have a makeup artist and a costume mistress who runs out between every single take, not between every scene, but between every single take, and redoes the model's hair, redoes the model's makeup, works the clothes with pins and tape, etc., so everything hangs and falls just right. You know, it is absolutely a crafted image. And I think we have to ask some questions about what does that do to real people, because it's hard to not compare ourselves. I mean, as much as we know that's not a good idea, it's really hard for all of us to not compare ourselves to other people. And if what we see in the media makes us look worse and worse, well, there could be some problems there. And we'll want to talk about that. There's a slide number 16 about what would a real woman look like if she was in the same proportions as Barbie. And it's a picture of a model standing there, and they've drawn lines about what all they would have to cut off and trim to make a real woman look like Barbie. And the sad fact is she would die kind of a painful death because there wouldn't even be enough room in her abdomen for most of her organs, etc. Right? So we feed some really odd images to people. This has been proven or shown or demonstrated, I should say, in recent history because of a study done in Fiji. Well, here's the deal. Before the introduction of TV, young women saw their aunts, they saw their mothers, their grandmothers, and that was the image of what they were supposed to look like. All right? And eating disorders were virtually unheard of. Young girls really didn't have body image problems because they felt very natural and they looked like the people that were around them. Well, in just a short period of time, in about 3 years, after TV was introduced, eating disorders skyrocketed, like from none to 30% of girls. And the only change in their society, the only change in their culture was the introduction of TV. And I hate to bash America, but especially things like Beverly Hills 90210, Baywatch, things of this nature, where they were exposed to women who didn't look anything like their grandmothers, mothers, aunts, friends, or themselves. And because of that introduction, eating disorders and body image problems skyrocketed in that population. So that's a kind of a modern study that we can do to look at to say, yeah, media does have some effects. All right. I'm on to slide 21 now. We're talking about subliminal messages. All I hit about that. Has anyone ever heard of subliminal messages? Yeah, okay. When I was studying advertising in college, when I was subliminals was a big thing. Like, oh, wow. Everybody was into subliminals. And if you took this whiskey ad and turned it upside down and squinted your eyes real hard, you could see the word sex written into an ice cube. Upside down, squinted, as it, The idea was your subconscious would still get these messages. Well, we really don't think that it works. There was an old shtick about a guy in a movie theater inserted one frame of hungry, eat popcorn. And frames are going by 30 frames a second, but he would put in one and all of a sudden his popcorn sales go up. Well, I worked in a movie theater when I was a teenager, and I know what sells popcorn. That's the smell, right? You walk into the theater, that you got that fresh popcorn smell. That's what sells it, not 1/30th of a frame. It's BS. So it hasn't been proven. And there's still urban myths that when we're walking around in the grocery store, underneath the music, it's saying, I am an honest citizen, I will not steal, right? This goes back to that bullet theory, right? That media is so powerful, you and I can basically be programmed. I don't buy it. All right. So the other big area besides how much we screw up women with media, the other big question in this chapter is about media and violence. So we'll talk about this in the Zoom meeting, so I don't want to take too much of it away, but this is a really old question. And again, it harkens all the way back into bullet theory, that the idea is we're going to see something and then we're going to do it. So the question I want you to think about is, does watching violence in the media make you and me more violent or more likely to commit a violent act? All right, so that's one of the questions. Now, there are some people who say, yes, absolutely. It's like monkey see, monkey do. You're socialized to it. What you see, you're going to act. I'm going to ask you to watch a documentary called The Mean World Syndrome. I love it. I think it's dynamite. And he takes this whole question of, does watching violence in media make us more violent? He turns it all the way around and looks at it from a whole different angle, which I think is really, really smart. Some people think that watching violence in media has what's called a cathartic effect. That I'm really mad and I'm pissed off, so I go home and I watch 300 and they kill a bunch of guys and then I feel better. It lets all that stress off. So that, in a way, violence in the media actually serves society by releasing tension and aggression. It doesn't cause it. It allows us to work it out in a safe way. So these are things that we'll be able to discuss. We can kick around the forum. You might want to do a paper on it. We'll do it in the Zoom meeting, okay? But that's one of the big questions is, what does media violence do for us? So you can kind of read through a lot of that. There are other things called catalytic theory, that watching it or being exposed to it doesn't cause it, but it can kind of amp things up. And it can magnify or amplify. Like, I get really mad one time, but this time, because of the stuff I saw, I lose it. So that's called catalytic theory. You'll want to know about that one. And I don't want to steal too much of the George Germer thing. I'm getting into slide like 28 now. And you see that the idea of real and perceived violence is quite a bit different. And we think that that comes because we see so much violence in the media. It's about 100 times the real average, right? And that does start to have an effect on us. All right. I think that really that's going to kind of cover some of that chapter. The rest we'll do on Zoom. So that's chapter 13. So we'll have that discussion on Zoom. And please, you need to watch the Mean World Syndrome. You can watch it on Canopy. I've put the link on Moodle for you. So once you click that, it'll take you to the Canopy page. You'll have to log in with your CMO stuff. And then I didn't put the link for that, but if you just go into the search bar and put Mean World Syndrome, it'll pop it up. It's 51 minutes long. I think it's great. Now, because it's about media and violence, it is chock full of tons of violent stuff. I mean, it's wow, it's a lot. But if you pay attention, the questions that they ask and the theories they come up with about the real effects of media violence, I think are really, really interesting. And that's the thing I'm going to want to spend some time talking about. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to wrap this one up for now. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy and, keeping everything together. Keep working. Shoot me questions on email if you got anything, and I'll see you guys on Zoom. Have a good day.